Mikael, welcome to the show.
Thank you for hosting me.
Electric boats that ride above the waves. In episode 28, I'm joined by Mikael Mahlberg, the head of communications at CANDELA. As well as looking really cool, their hydrofoiling technology is game-changing for the electrification of boats. It's great for efficiency, speed, it's kind to our buildings in Venice, it's great for seasickness, it's going to improve our leisure, commuting and ferrying and so much more. So hear from a company that's already commercial, they're making sales without making waves. And you'll see what I mean as we get into this episode. We hope you enjoy. CANDELA has been on my radar for a while. Been getting quite excited about electric boats. So thank you for coming on. Let's start with your personal story. Talk us through kind of, why you joined CANDELA and, your story to date.
Yeah, so I'm a former journalist, a boat journalist, and in my previous career, I tried all the leisure boats on the market, electric and gasoline. And back in 2017, I had the opportunity to test drive the very first CANDELA prototype of what would later become the Canela C8. And the combination of just the smooth ride and the lack of wake and that it's completely silent when you're flying just blew me away. It's an experience that's so different and much better than conventional powerboating. And that convinced me that if electric is the future, which it definitely is, this was a time when Tesla started to become pretty big in Sweden. I wanted to join this journey.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of gliding across the surface of the water or above the water. We'll get into that later, but I'm someone who sometimes gets seasick. So when I saw this, I was like, wow, that's amazing. It sounds like you obviously were very passionate about this before joining CANDELA. So give us a bit of history on the electrification of boats.
Yeah, so electrification of boats is only starting off now, I would say. The issue with making a really good electric boat is that if you have a conventional hull, you have so much drag from the water that it's pretty hard to get a good range at high speed using even the best lithium-ion batteries. I mean, if you take a conventional 25-foot boat, it uses around 15 times more fuel per kilometer than a standard family car. So just dropping a Tesla style or a electric car battery into a conventional hull, that leads to quite disappointing performance in most cases, right? So that's why electric boats haven't really taken off until the advent of hydrofoiling, which we're coming to now. And
just before we do that, what rate of adoption are you seeing for electric boats?
It's a good question, and what we're seeing is that our Canela C8 is the market leader right now in terms of sales. We've sold around 150 units. This is a premium boat. It's priced at around 400,000 euros, including VAT. And you can see that it's actually outselling quite a lot of the combustion engine models in the same price and size range, right? So it is a bit of a Tesla Model S moment for electric boats, but it also shows that the electric boat market is quite small at the moment. There's many hundred of thousand gasoline boats being sold every year, but we're starting to penetrate that leisure boat market, and we're also moving to electric public transportation on water, and that's where I think we'll see the big difference in the coming years.
And your sales so far, they've been mainly in Europe or worldwide?
We've sold boats to I think 12 or 13 countries at the moment, and the biggest market is the US, definitely. So the West Coast and the East Coast, and Miami, San Francisco, New York, and some lakes as well. So it's split around 50% of the sales go to the US and the rest goes to Europe, basically.
You referenced Tesla before. Do you think the electrification of boats will kind of piggyback on the consumers have become more aware and they understand the electrification of cars? Do you think that will help adoption?
Yeah, definitely. The first 50 customers we had were all Tesla owners, right? And now with more brands entering the market, that's starting to diversify. But definitely, I mean, we piggyback off the car industry a lot. Awareness about electric vehicles is one thing, but also the ability to get high-grade lithium-ion batteries in large quantities that would have been impossible 20 years ago, right? So we use batteries from the electric car maker Polestar. So we just dropped the electric battery of a Polestar 2 car into our vessels, which is great. And I would also like to stress the importance. I mean, making an electric car is fairly straightforward. I mean, it's hard to make a car, but you still have four wheels, and that's it, right? So you swap out the drivetrain, swap out a lot of other things, but you don't have to reinvent the concept of car. With electric boats, you have to do that because with current batteries, you can't really just make a conventional electric boat and expect the same performance that you would have in your gasoline boat because of the drag I mentioned before. So a good lithium-ion battery pack contains per kilogram about 1/15 of the energy of a liter of diesel. So, I mean, batteries are heavy and contain very little energy compared to diesel or gasoline. And that's why you have to reduce the friction by using hydrofoils in order to make an electric boat that has adequate performance. So you cannot just build a boat, you have to sort of reinvent the boat itself.
I was going to ask what you see your main USP as. Is that it, hydrofoiling?
Yes, hydrofoiling is the main USP, and that brings a lot of different advantages. So the first is the reduced energy consumption. So a Candela vessel uses, we cut the energy consumption by around 80% compared to a conventional boat. And that is huge. I mean, even a 5% reduction in the car industry is a huge deal. So 80% is really a game changer. And that allows our vessels to go far and fast on battery power alone. We can also use fairly small batteries. We have a 69 kilowatt hour battery in the Canela C8 from the Polestar 2 car. And that allows us to go 65 US miles on that one at 22 knots, fairly high cruise speed. And we can also, since we have that's so small batteries, we can recharge them pretty quickly with DC charging in around 25 minutes from 10 to 80%.
The current capacity for your batteries, you can charge at 80% within 25 minutes.
Yeah. And that we've done. We've done that we set a world range record for electric boats last year here in Stockholm. So we, using DC charging, we tried to find out how far you can go in 24 hours. So we went around the archipelago in a loop, and then we charged in between those loops, and we covered 420 nautical miles. That's 777 kilometers in 24 hours, which is quite far for an electric boat. I think the previous record in 20 hours were barely 100 miles, right? So you could go really far with the hydrofoiling because you can recharge your battery quickly. You use a fairly small one, and you have long range.
I watched Motorboat and Yachting's review of was that the Canela 7 or Canela 8?
Well, they did too. I think the most recent was the Canela C8. Yes, the very first prototype they had to go in the Stockholm archipelago.
Looked amazing. Obviously, kind of floats above the water. It kind of rises over the chop. Handled very well. I was super interested in actually getting on a boat at some point. It looked really cool. But neither of us are scientists here. But can you try and explain to us what hydrofoiling actually is?
Yeah, we're going to get you on that boat. I promise that.
I wasn't inviting myself. I was just saying I'm excited to one day.
Well, it's going to happen. We have boats in so many countries now that that's not going to be an issue. But hydrofoiling, I mean, it's really an old thing. Hydrofoiling, that's basically using underwater wings, right? And using the same principle as aircraft wings do when they produce lift. So you have a flow over the wing and one under the wing, which creates a pressure difference. So creates a lift, right? And that lift is enough to lift the whole boat, including 8 passengers above the surface of the water. And if you look at these wings, they look ridiculously small compared to aircraft wings, but that's because the density of water is almost 800 times that of air. So we can have pretty small wings and still get a lot of lift.
And what speed does the boat lift?
It's on what kind of profile you have on the wing, right? But we've optimized this boat for a cruise speed of 22 knots. So that means that we have a takeoff speed of around 16 knots. That's when the boat starts to rise up on the foils. And that's also determined by by the boat's computer. So if you grab the steering wheel and you go full throttle, then the boat's brain, the computer, will know that, okay, this guy wants to take off, right? So at 60 knots, it will perform the takeoff sequence, basically changing the medium angle of attack of the front foil so that the boat pops out onto water. Once the boat is flying, we use these computer systems to stabilize it, because it becomes sort of an inherently unstable craft. It means that the lifting point is under the center of gravity. So it kind of wants to tip over. And that's why we continually stabilize it by twisting this wing under it, using a lot of sensors that sense the wave heights and the incoming waves and so on. And the result is that we get an artificially stable craft. It's not inherently stable, but it's artificially made stable, and it doesn't roll, it doesn't slam in waves. So you asked about seasickness. You can't really get seasick in a Candela. I had a photographer from BBC once on board, and he had thrown up on every boat he ever was on. So he was kind of turning greenish when we went out of the harbor. But once we started to hydrofoil, he was fine.
When you say it kind of takes off at 15, 16, is that the most efficient way to run the boat? So will that give you the most range, or are you kind of hitting a sweet spot, say 18, 19?
Yeah, you hit the sweet spot at 22. So that's the most efficient speed. And you kind of want to stay there. You can go up to 27 as well. You will lose a bit of range, but usually when you go out in a Candela, you kind of stay around your cruise speed, and you don't have to slow down for wakes either. You just kind of pass over them. So it's a bit like you set your cruise speed there, and then you're good to go.
Obviously, with the hydrofoiling technology, and of course with it being an electric motor, more efficient, more sustainable from that perspective. Before I get into the manufacturing processes, do you have comparisons in terms of how expensive it is for the consumer to run a electric boat versus a combustion engine?
The main thing with Canela here is the energy savings you get from the foil system, right? So when you're starting to fly and then you're adding the efficiency of an electric drivetrain, and this one we happen to have made ourselves, it's called the Canela C8. So we have a bespoke motor solution in the C8 where we have a submerged pod with a direct drive motor or two direct drive motors. So we don't have a transmission, and that obviously makes for a much more efficient drivetrain, also very silent. So overall, you save around 95% of the fuel or energy cost compared to a similar sized gasoline-powered traditional planing boat. So it's almost free to run it. Going out here in the archipelago, that's around 100 Swedish crowns or 10 euros, going back and forth between the outer islands. So, and that's something people kind of tend to not do because it's so expensive with a gasoline boat. So they do that a few times a year, right?
In terms of the manufacturing processes, supply chain, what efforts are you taking there to make sure your whole process is net zero and sustainable?
I mean, carbon fiber we're building all boats out of carbon fiber because it's a lightweight material. And just like when you build aircraft, you need to make these things light, right? Because otherwise they won't fly. Carbon fiber in itself isn't really, it's not paper or some fancy biodegradable material, but it is very lightweight, and that's why we use it, and we have to. We've done an LCA together with the Swedish Technology University, KTH, and that life cycle analysis shows that a Candela emits around 97.5% less emissions over a 30-year-old lifetime compared to a conventional boat, which is huge, obviously, right? And that's because most of the footprint is not from production, it's from usage with a boat, because boats consume so much energy. So really, and I mean, compared to a car, which you scrap after 10 to 15 years maybe, or at least 20 years, boats tend to live forever. So the manufacturing phase is really not the most important phase.
There's evident reasons why you should maybe run an electric boat is more cost efficient, maybe feel better on it, but there's going to be reasons why, I guess you'd call them petrol heads in the car world. What are the kind of main objections you're coming up against as to why someone wouldn't purchase a C7, a C8, and instead would opt for a more traditional boat?
I think at this point it's mainly price, right? Because this is a premium boat made out of carbon fiber, upgradable over the air, so on. So I mean, it has all the features, but it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone's wallet size, at least. So that's the main thing hindering mass market adoption right now. But I think, for petrol heads, definitely there are those people that appreciate the sounds of a V8 engine and so on. But I would say that the vast majority of people actually enjoy being able to conversate their passengers going at high speed without having to shout over the noise of an engine, right? So I think we might overestimate how many petrol heads there are out there.
In terms of the price point, remind me of the price point of a C8 right now. So obviously we're talking about the kind of leisure boats.
Right, so 330,000 euros excluding VAT, so depends on where you live, right? So, and if you look at a conventional boat like a Chris Craft or some other high-end brand, they kind of end up there as well with a few options. So we're on par with the premium market, definitely already. And I think the interesting thing here is to look at the P12, the ferry that we're probably going to cover later. But when you look at public transportation or commercial operators or vessels, the purchasing cost of the vessel is not that important. It's really the operational costs, right? Because they use these vessels for maybe 30 years. And we can see that after 1 or 2 or 3 years, a Candela P12 starts to overtake the conventional vessel in terms of cost, right? So you have very low OPEX, which benefits the transition to more sustainable vessels, because you need to be able to make a profit out of it.
We'll talk about the P12. I'm very interested to kind of hear about that, because it's a different market for you. But very quickly, with the leisure side of the business, with C8, for example, what you're working on right now in terms of driving adoption, is that the price, as you mentioned, or is it more performance and things like this?
Right. So right now we have the C8 platform, which currently has the lineup consists of a day cruiser, but we're also bringing a more US oriented, you could say, fishing style boat, which is called the Canela C8 center console, to the market on this very platform. So we have this 8-meter hull and the technology, and that we can transform into different vessels, really. And that's coming in 2025. So I think that will capture a different type of market, because a day cruiser is primarily a Nordic and European phenomenon. The central console, though, is the world's most sold boat, so I think we can sell quite a lot of those.
I'm not a keen fisherman myself, but my father is. He loves fishing, and just for this episode, I wore my T-shirt that has a fish in it, just for you. And again, just before we get into the P12, talk me through your current battery pack and battery capabilities.
The battery size of a hydrofoiling boat, that's obviously we're trying to hit the sweet spot between a range, payload, and so on, right? So we have a 69 kilowatt hour battery pack from the electric car maker Polestar, the same battery pack as in the fastback Polestar 2, that car. And it also comes with the DC charging of the Polestar 2, so that means that we can DC charge it, as I said earlier, in less than 30 minutes from 10 to 80%. And that helps a lot, actually, because then you can cover a lot of use cases that you would otherwise not be able to cover. There's a few charging stations being rolled out in Sweden. We have a lot more along the French Riviera, in the Med. We have some in the US as well, and some in England, and quite a few in Norway. So, these charging networks are starting to pop up. And with that DC charging capability, you can really go places with this boat, really cover vast distances, and also use it for commercial purposes. We have a P8 Voyager taxi boat configuration coming out, and just with a few charging stations in Stockholm, for example, you could electrify the whole archipelago pretty easily.
And just in terms of range, are you seeing, is it 50 nautical miles at 22?
We say 57 nautical miles at 22 knots. So according to our real-world driving cycle that we performed, the range can vary. If you have a lot of headwind, it will go down a little bit. And if you have some tailwind, it might go up a little bit, right? But it's around there, yeah.
And without hydrofoiling, the current shape, the current hull, how much would the range decrease, the speed decrease with your current battery power?
You can attain almost 20 knots for short periods of time, right? But it uses around 1.15 kilowatt hours per nautical mile at 22 knots. If you're at say 18 knots, it uses around 5-6 kilowatt hours per nautical mile. So that's you get a dramatically shorter range, right? You can drive it as a conventional boat as well. If the waves are super high, say they're 2.5 meters high, you won't be able to foil. For example, if you want to cross a bar into a harbor and so on, you might want that kind of extra power and use it as a conventional boat. Then you can do so for shorter stretches with the foils retracted. But that will obviously affect your range and make it as bad as any conventional electric boat in terms of performance. We typically see that there's a lot of electric boat manufacturers that claim range numbers that are high. What we see though when we try these things in the real world is that typical range of a conventional electric boat is somewhere between 18 to 25 nautical miles, depending on how much batteries you drop into them. You come to a point when you have some heavy batteries on board that the boat starts to almost sink, right? So you kind of tend to hit that physical brick wall at around 25 nautical miles if you have a conventional boat with a glass fiber hull and so on.
You mentioned before the sales that you've made, which is good. Obviously kind of a commercial business. What are you seeing the balance between leisure and professional? So C8 versus P12.
Yeah, we think we already see now that P12 will be a majority of the revenue going forward, because it makes sense. It makes sense from a business standpoint. If you're a shuttle operator or a public transport company, there's obviously pressure to go sustainable, but there's also a pressure to be profitable, at least in terms of private operators. And if those things can go hand in hand, if you can reduce your cost by around 50% while getting a faster vessel that brings more confidence and reduces your energy consumption by 80% and your greenhouse emissions by 97.5%, then you have a good combination, right? And then you have a good business case. So we see that we have large P12 sales right now. We sell a lot of them, and we think that will be the main source of revenue. But we're also gonna push forward with the leisure boats because there's a huge market for that too, but it's not as huge.
The P12, the main function, the main application is a shuttle ferry. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a platform, and in its first form, which is called a P12 Shuttle, it will be a 30-passenger transport vessel, really a bus on the water, kind of same configuration. You enter from through a wide ramp at the front, and then you go past the driver, the captain, and then you enter this spacious cabin with seats for 30 passengers. You have space for strollers, bikes, so on, so you can do the last mile commute with your bike, wheelchairs, of course. And that's the first form, and that's also what we'll see here in Stockholm, because it will run in public transportation in Stockholm from this fall. And then we're also coming with two other variants, which are called the P12 Voyager and P12 Business. And those are, the P12 Business is up to 20-person vessel, more luxurious, a bit more VIP, And then we have the Voyager, which is a fully customizable configuration. So if you want like an art space or a bar or whatever, a private yacht, you can have that, right? Or a transport version for DHL or who knows. So it's really a wide space in that sense, the Voyager.
Yes, I guess, as you said, Stockholm, Sweden. I guess this could work in Venice.
Yeah.
Potentially in Italy and New York. I have a very good friend in New York who gets the ferry there to work every day. So I can see that working. We visit the Greek islands often. We got married there a couple of years ago. And again, we have to get the ferry to visit different islands. That's, of course, longer range, kind of maybe choppier waters. Can the P12 accommodate that right now, or do you see that happening in future models?
Yeah, we do that. I mean, we can do up to 2 meter high waves without worries. So we can go offshore as long as the sea state isn't too bad, right? But then you can always drive it as a conventional vessel as well. But I mean, we've sold boats to the Middle East, to a lot of lakes and some hospitality companies as well. So I think we'll see these in use in many cities. Venice, as you mentioned, that's really a great case. I think that's interesting for us because they have this issue in Venice with something called moto indosso. That's wake-induced damage to the old buildings there, because these buildings are standing on wooden pillars, sometimes 500, 600 years old. And those pillars were not designed for fast taxi boats that are planing. And because these taxi boats and all the other vessels, all transportation is done by boat there, they create these wakes that erode these pillars, and that threatens to actually ruin Venice in a sense, and so on. So if they would switch to hydrofoiling vessels, that would definitely help with that issue.
I was thinking before about the whole kind of shuttle ferry situation. I'm guessing it's the same battery pack, so same charging capability, 25 minutes, 80%.
We don't have the Polestar battery pack in the P12 ferry at the moment, so we use a different battery pack for that one. It's a bit tricky because you have to have marine certified battery packs to be certified by DNV, which is this agency that certifies vessels. It's a whole new game compared to leisure boats, really. So there's not super much to choose from, but the options are getting better, I would say, in the future. That said, this is a very safe and good pack, so we're happy with that. And DC charging, yeah, it's currently at 175 kilowatts and will be even faster in the future.
Like the C8, I was asking before, kind of with the leisure side of the business, where are you taking that? What are you working on? On the professional side, what are you working on to make, to increase adoption?
P12 is our big focus right now, and it's brand new. And people tend to ask me, are you working on a bigger ferry? That's the main question we get, right? And the reason why we made such a handy sized ferry, a 30-passenger ferry, which is like 40 feet long, is that we believe that waterborne transport should be conducted in a different way. At the moment in Stockholm and in many cities around the world, we have pretty large vessels. Average size is around 350 passengers, right? The issue is that a lot of these ferries are running around almost empty. The average passenger load factor here in Stockholm is around 5 to 10%. So that's 30 passengers on a 300-person ship, right? On average. So what that means is that they're running around with a lot of empty seats, and they're just wasting diesel fuel, which is expensive and polluting. And if we can switch this system with few and large ferries to a system where you have fleets of more nimble, smaller ferries, but more of them, then you can sort of reproduce the bus system that we have on land, where you have frequent departures, smaller units that you fill up with passengers. And if we would have that system on the water, we could actually transport a lot more people and make the waterborne commute a more attractive option for car commuters and other travelers, and save a lot of costs because we don't have to run around with empty seats.
That's super interesting data, how empty these ferries are. What was the numbers again in Stockholm?
5 to 10% on average over the whole year. So, I mean, days like these, I mean, the sun is shining outside here. It's 28 degrees warm. You will probably see an increased ridership then. But that's like 1 week of the year, right? And then you have midsummer and so on. But, I mean, these ferries are running all year round. And, I mean, in the winter, nobody's taking them. Because, I mean, if you want to commute to work, right, you need to be able to plan your life a bit around kindergarten and schools and whatnot, right? And if the ferry leaves once every hour, you won't take it. You will take the car, or you will take the bus or your bike, whatever. Typically, people take the car, right? The politicians here in Stockholm actually have a plan for reducing car commuting and shifting those over to the waterways. And more frequent departures is a key thing there. If the departure frequency is less than once every 12 minutes, people stop looking at timetables and they just go to their boat stop or bus stop or whatever and just take the next vessel that comes along. So that's the key thing here, to increase ridership.
A couple of questions to finish off. It's been really enjoyable, but I've got some data and information that I wasn't expecting to get, so very, very interesting. If we were to fast forward 10 years from now, where do you see the future of electric boating? And I guess specifically to Candela, professional or leisure?
I think for electric boats in general, I think they will take off, literally. And I think we'll see two types of electric leisure boats, really. Either the slow-moving vessels, like sloops and the kind, they will all be electric, because there's no reason to not make them electric. They're going to end up being vastly better if they don't have their noisy drivetrains. And those are really easy to electrify. Just drop batteries in them and an electric motor. And then with faster power boats, I think you will see more hydrofoiling vessels, definitely. I think that will sort of be the norm in 10 to 15 years. I think if you see a new boat that doesn't really take off at high speed, something will be wrong with the foil system. Right? I mean, it's I don't think we'll see too many conventional electric power boats that are high speed. And then with the commercial vessels, I think you will see a lot of P12 systems in many cities and many countries. And that's a fact because I already know that there will be quite a few systems out there because we have those contracts signed. But I think we will see a lot more. And I think we'll see that the waterways will be more relevant and used more than today.
We said we weren't going to go on holiday to Greece this year because we've just moved to Spain, but we can't stay away. Well, my wife loves the sun and, we want to stay. Want to go to Greece. We obviously got married there a couple of years ago, but I hope one day that we can be getting a ferry like yours, the P12, no seasickness, I guess a bit quicker as well, and, super, super cool. So, yeah, I really do hope it takes off, quite literally. Final question from a former guest. I've got a random generator. We've got 5 to choose from. So I'm just going to select the question here. Maybe relevant to you guys. How much are geopolitics affecting your business operations at the moment?
Well, you were talking about the tension here between the West and the East, right? Well, I can't say that affects us at the moment. We have not had any significant interest from the countries affected, anyways. And in terms of components, we build almost everything except the battery pack in Sweden at Candela. All the tech is designed in-house, including the motors, produced here as well. So at the moment, that's not really affecting us at all, I would say.
Well, Mikael, thank you very much for coming. I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, hopefully one day I'll be on a P12, or maybe I'll even own a C8.
I'll give you a really good rebate. I promise you that, Jamie.
A good discount. Thank you. Well, Mikael, thank you again. Good luck with everything you're working on. Big fan of what you guys are doing, and yeah, all the best. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamie.
Pleasure.